Hello there, wonderful Bowen practitioners. Nice to see you again. This is me, Ben Calder, for the BTPA, the Bowen Therapy Professional Association, bringing you another one of our interviews with our Bowen practitioners around the world. Today we're going to speak to Sharon Schofield, who's based down in Suffolk, and she is a life coach, having spent 35 years in HR and training. She's been offering life coaching and career guidance, specializing in people with neurodiversity, training coaches how to coach, doing all sorts of wonderful work. She's been a Bowen practitioner since 2019 and now working with College of Bowen Studies, CBS, offering life coaching and business development work. And we had a great conversation about some of the common problems, things people are unaware of, just how to go about coaching, especially around things like imposter syndrome and knowing what success looks like for you, what it is that you're wanting to do, the importance of mindset and how the subconscious can affect the way that we are behaving. And so, Sharon's speaking to us about how we deal with transition, how we deal with burnout, and ways that we can improve our practice, and talks about some of her own interesting experiences as she's developed as a Bowen practitioner as well. So really looking forward to sharing this with you, because I think that business guidance and actually helping you to develop your businesses further is a really key part of our Bowen training. But before we get on to the interview, let's remember to get down into that subscribe button. Please make sure you like and you share our interviews so we can help the rest of the world really understand the value of Bowen technique and keep on spreading the word about it. So without further ado, here we go, myself and Sharon Schofield. Hi there, Sharon. Great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me here for another one of these BTPA interviews.
Hi, Ben. I'm actually really excited, genuinely, about doing this. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. I think we've got so much really interesting information about Bowen and what supports it. We've got this very standalone idea of Bowen technique being this thing that doesn't need anything else. And I think that one of the things we're really getting to understand a lot more is that in itself, Bowen's great, but if we're going to make the business of Bowen work really well, then we need to understand other things and we need to move forward. But we'll get into a lot of the kind of the discussion of that as we get along a little bit here. But first of all, I'd really like, for anybody that hasn't come across you before, doesn't know your work, could you give us a bit of a potted history about who you are and how you got to where we are now?
Okay, well, I've got a strange potted history because, or maybe not strange, unusual, that I was actually in the corporate world for about 35 years in HR. However, I had been a supporter of Bowen for probably most of that time. I came across it really early on and got the opportunity 6 years ago to train. When I saw that I could train in Bowen, I thought that's it. That's what I want to do for the sort of second part or end of my career, probably with my age. And so I 6 years ago, well, more than 6 years ago, I qualified 6 years ago, but I took up the training, and now I'm actually working for myself. I've stepped away from the corporate world and all that, and just loving life now, doing the things I'm absolutely passionate about.
Beautiful. So tell me a little bit. So 35 years doing HR and training work in a corporate environment. What kind of stuff were you having to deal with there? What was, the meat of the work that you were getting into?
So I've done a lot of work with leadership, and that's where my coaching has come in. So I've been qualified in coaching since I was about 25. So I've got eons of experience in coaching, let's say leadership coaching. But then I got the privilege, and I was class it as a privilege, of training people to coach, and what you learn about coaching, I think, is that it's a life skill. You use it with your friends, your family, your work colleagues. It's something you use throughout your life. And I have done a lot of work with people that we would now say come under the neurodiverse banner. It wasn't identified then. It was just people that were struggling a little bit in the work environment. So I've done a lot of work helping people to get the best out of their lives, really, in their working lives during my sort of career.
Where did Bowen technique come into that for you? So you've been kind of accessing it for a long time, but what took you into having Bowen technique, exploring Bowen technique for yourself?
But what happened was I actually ended up not being able to walk for a month. And I went through the whole medical, as you can imagine. I worked for a large organisation at the time who had private medicals. They were able to pay for me to have every type of test. And they couldn't find anything. And nobody understood why I couldn't walk. I was just completely fatigued. And a friend of mine, it was actually a friend of my husband's, actually said, you need to try this. You need to see this chap up in Shropshire in Bowen. You need to see him. I mean, he was an hour away from where we lived, but we went there, and it was, I'm going to be honest, it was like a miracle cure, because just from the first session, I started to get more movement, and probably by the fourth, fifth, I was feeling like almost back to normal, having gone for and I think what I've learned now subsequently is I was actually burnt out. Burnout then wasn't recognised, but I had a very stressful job, and it was burnout, and it was Bowen that got me back on my feet and continually kept me going throughout my career. So yeah, so I owe so much to Bowen that I just think that it's something that everybody needs.
You know it, we certainly do. Who was the practitioner who you saw as well, out of interest? Because it'd be great to just have a shout out for him.
His name is David Driver. Yeah, and I think he's probably one of the original Bowen therapists. I'm not sure if he's still practicing now, because I live literally the other end of the country, but I hope he is, because he's great.
Yeah, sure. Certainly, I haven't heard from David for quite a long time, but certainly he and I used to communicate a bit because my main practice was down in Shrewsbury for a very long time. But David was practicing Bowen way before I was as well, and because we had those crossovers within the kinesiology side of things as well,
Yes.
he and I used to communicate at times. Yeah, what a great story, and I think it continues to highlight this beautiful function of Bowen technique for being able to deal with things that we think are physiological, but are showing a representation up through the body, just saying we need a break and changing how we do things. So that's really fabulous stuff. Hopefully these days as well, you're still going and getting your regular Bowen treatments and looking after yourself.
Absolutely. I just do it as swaps now with other Bowen therapists, which is fab.
Yeah, sure. Good. And tell us what brought you into, because you're now doing a life coaching training as part of the CPD through College Bound Studies through CBS.
Yeah.
So what got you into that position? What was it that kind of brought about that within this stage of your career?
Really interesting. Yeah, I think when I started to move out of the corporate world, I always knew I was going to carry on coaching. I think I didn't know whether I was going to. I probably thought at that time I was going to carry on coaching in the corporate world, doing more leadership coaching and that type of thing. And I was speaking to a friend who was another therapist that said, actually, do you know, I work from a sort of therapy centre, not-for-profit therapy centre in Bury St Edmunds. And she was saying, we've got a lot of therapists, but we haven't got any life coaches. And so why don't you come and do some life coaching? Because you've got all the experience. It's because it's a label. Some people go on courses to do it, but I've actually got the lifetime experience of being a life coach. And I guess because of my previous career being HR, I've seen a lot of life, and what goes on for people. So I started down that route, but always with the intention that Bowen was going to be a big part of my career as well. And I never thought the two would mix, interestingly, at that point. I thought it was just going to be two things that I did. And then what then happens, or what transpires, is obviously Bowen therapists have lives too that they need help with. So Joe Wortley from CBS said to me, I think actually Bowen therapists would really benefit of the offer of coaching, because she said, see so many people that are either stuck in trying to do the transition from going from whatever they're currently doing to really wanting to build up their Bowen business and take sort of leaps into doing that, or they're really trying to work out, is this for me? Is this what I want to do? Or they're trying to juggle lots of things in their lives. And actually, in the end, I said, well, I'm more than happy to offer the coaching, for Bowen therapists, because it's actually, it will benefit them if they feel that they need that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the things that I've said for a long time. So I've had my own clinic down in Shrewsbury now, Centre for Integral Health, for I think we're 14 years this year, so a decent whack of time. And it's something that I had seen previously. I used to mentor kinesiologists many years ago and teach kinesiology. I've watched it through my own clinic and through in a lot of other spaces. And what I see is loads of people who are really good at the therapies but are terrible at business. And they don't understand necessarily how to get the focus on how to do the business of Bowen and understand that that's not the same as being a good Bowen therapist, and trying to learn a skill that for some people is just not something that comes through as a piece of common sense. It's not obvious for them. It's not necessarily easy. But I felt that mentoring side in the business, and I think, as you're speaking about it, that transition of going from whatever it is you have been doing into whatever it is you're trying to do can be a very challenging space, especially if you've been in a paid role where, you know what you've got to do, you're going to get your pay at the end of the week or the end of the month in a certain way. And it doesn't take quite the same focus and discipline and behavior. So tell us a little bit. I'd love to hear your reflections on that and just how you go about making those kind of adjustments with people.
Yeah, well, and it's really interesting. It came to the fore this week, last week. We did Joe and I and a few other therapists did we had a trade stand at the Suffolk Agriculture Show, massive show. Of course, lots of people were going, "What's Bowen?" because they haven't heard of it. And actually, what really struck us was what happens is a lot of therapists train, and then they start building their business by word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, really, that can be really successful. But then no one else knows about Bowen other than all the word of mouth. There isn't that marketing side within a person's area to really get Bowen sort of out there. And so for me, I think it's about mentoring is interesting, because it is then mentoring. Once I go into helping people to understand what they can do, the transition that they can take, and what they need to do for how to promote their business, it is a bit more unique then to them, their area, where they are, what other therapists are around them they can work with to sort of promote Bowen. And the other big lesson, and this is always an interesting one, the more we've learned, the more Bowen therapists we have in an area, the more successful Bowen is for being known, getting it out there. There isn't this competition thing with Bowen therapists. I work with another Bowen therapist in the same as the South Centre in Bury, and we don't cross over. But we've managed to promote Bowen, and so I think it's almost breaking down some of the mindsets as well, I think, around it.
Yeah, sure. I absolutely agree with that. It's one point, I've had 3 kinesiologists, 3 Bowen therapists, 5 hypnotherapists, all working out of the same business. And it's not going to prevent us doing well. And I think that mindset, that lack mindset, is a really interesting one.
Yeah.
Because we don't look at GPs, for instance, and consider the fact that there might be 5 GPs in the practice, there might be 2 to 3 to 4 practices within an immediate area, all there is more provision then to support health for a wider number of people.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a very important aspect to look at. So is there any particular approach that you take with people when that type of mindset arises? How do you kind of go about shifting that with them?
So, interestingly, again, how coaching fundamentally works is in purest coaching, it is about listening to the person, asking questions, open questions, and then based on what they're saying, is really start to dig much deeper into what's coming out of their subconscious. So when people are sort of presenting with their views on competition and that kind of thing, it's starting to help them understand, well, where does that come from? Where does that belief come from? How is that manifesting itself for them? Where do they see that happening? And actually, I think what ends up they start realizing is actually it's all in their head and it isn't actually the reality. It's almost the opposite. So it's about sort of helping people become more enlightened to thinking broader than what's in, they're tending to be stuck in their head.
Yeah. And in your experience, how unconscious is that whole behavioral pattern that people are following as far as business is concerned? How much of that is just an unconscious pattern that's probably seeded at some earlier part in their life and creates quite a lot of limitation in how they behave?
Yeah, it's really interesting, I think, because it's so easy, I think, to be a lonely soul as a Bowen therapist and think it's only you. And actually, the real depending on people's backgrounds and if they've been a sort of team player or been a very competitive individual, will probably shape a little bit of their mindset. So I tend to find that therapists that are very team playerish are really embracing of trying to work together with other therapists. Therapists that are very, I'm going to say this, and I hope this doesn't sound, I'm going to say money focused, but I mean it that way. That probably leads them down the wrong track and the wrong behaviour, because almost it's trying to help them understand that by being open and working more together with other therapists, the clients come. The sort of universe brings it to them. But actually, being a one horse, one trick pony, and only working on your own, you're limiting yourself. You're absolutely limiting yourself.
And do you find that swings the other way as well? So do you find that and again, speaking from my experience, I've often found that there is a fear of asking for money, of charging what is a healthy rate for the time, energy, effort, training, the space, everything you do. I find that there's quite often this sense of, I'm going to undervalue what I'm offering because it doesn't feel okay to ask a decent rate for what it is I'm doing, or I'm comparing myself to other similar services in my area and thinking that I need to stay in some kind of alignment with that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of new therapists really struggle with this. It's that jump into asking for money for something that I've just newly qualified in. And like you say, it's that understanding that, oh my gosh, you've done all this training, you are offering a service, you're offering something that works, you know that, you've done all your case studies and actually understanding when you look at other therapies and you look, there's plenty out there now, you can, there's some real value with Bowen, and clients come back. When they need Bowen, they'll come back to you. I always say to people as well that actually what I love about Bowen is you don't have to have lots and lots and lots and lots of Bowen sessions, unless it's something really acute. But most of the time, we know that within 3 sessions, if we haven't sorted somebody, then we're not going to be able to help them. We're not the right thing for them. And actually, it's getting people to understand. People value that, actually, because they're not being told, oh, you've got to have 10 sessions of this and you might get fixed. And that, that in itself is, I think adds a value in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you say that sometimes that transition from having been on a paid fixed rate, where you might be earning an hourly rate or you might be on a particular salary for X amount of hours. And again, I personally think that sometimes that when we know that the minimum wage is kind of what it is, and we think about how much we're charging for an hour's work, that sometimes the difference between those 2 points seems so significant that we forget about the fact that we're paying for training, we're paying for advertising, we're paying for room rentals, we might be paying for a website, insurance, professional indemnity, all of the other things that are actually in there as costs associated into the process. And we're not thinking about how each client is needing to pay a proportion to cover all of those things. So actually our take home at the end of it isn't what that upfront hourly rate is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's always an element of, you can always do pro bono, and most therapists do. So, if somebody really can't afford what you're offering, then that is your choice. However, most people I'll take an example, mainly ladies, will pay £40 to have their legs waxed. Well, the comparison of what Bowen, the quality of time and what they get value from Bowen is, it's not even comparable. So I just think, actually, the reality is people really value it, and they will pay because they value it. And they do feel they're getting value for money. That's the most important thing. And you are offering a service. You're offering your time and your expertise. It's you as the therapist. They want to see you're helping them, and they're willing to pay for that.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I'd love to hear your opinion on one of the strategies I've used now for over 20 years with my practice, but I don't advertise my prices. I just talk about what it is that I do. So it does two things for me. First of all, it doesn't mean that people immediately write it off based on the idea of whether or not they can meet the price. And secondly, it gives me flexibility. So if somebody says to me, I can't afford that rate, it means that I've got flexibility to make an adjustment for that person if I feel the need is warranted. But I'd be curious about your opinion on that from your years of experience.
Yeah, I think it probably depends where you practice from, because I'm practicing from a centre that has all the therapists, has all their rates under the therapist. We tend to have to our rates set, but what we will do is talk about a range, or talk about a different price for different timings, and that tends to give the flexibility then. So I might charge them for half an hour, but they may end up with an hour. So I've tended to do it that way. So that's like I say, it's a judgment call, isn't it?
For sure. Yeah, I know my webmasters are currently saying to me, "Come on, you've got to put your prices on your website, because when we go shopping, we want to know the price before we buy." And it's kind of like, yeah, but even getting onto the website and contacting us is still a step away from a purchase, because it's not an online product. You're not buying a thing that's then either going to be delivered or emailed to your inbox or whatever else there. It's actually, we're going through the stages of putting together a contract of working together. So there needs to be that kind of space of negotiation that goes on, so that, again, we're not getting people just buying based on price alone, and then they're not necessarily kind of looking around for what the cheapest option is when it comes into that process. Because for me personally, now 22 years of professional practice, 14 years of Bowen technique specifically, it's not the same as if you come and see me to going to see the person that's only just qualified or only been qualified for the last couple of years. Again, I think that it, like you say, it's a very personal and very individual kind of process about it, but that valuing what we do and who we are and our approach to the work, I think, has a significant part to it.
It does, massively. Yeah, massively.
Yeah, sure. So I'm kind of curious, within the work that you're doing, what are some of the kind of common problems, common mistakes, common issues that you're seeing coming up when you're talking to Bowen practitioners about the business that they're going through?
Actually see is people struggling to take their leap of faith from, they want to do more, but they're limited because they've normally got another job that they're doing, and they just feel like they're trying to juggle with when's the right time to just take this leap and go full steam. And again, for me, it's back to that. You won't just be able to do that by recommendation. That isn't enough if that's what you want to do. Some therapists want to do part-time, and that's absolutely fine, and that probably works much easier to make the leap. But if you really want to make this a much more near a full-time career, then you've got to almost get out there and market Bowen, market you and what you offer, and actually some people I think struggle with that because they're like, oh God, I've got to go out there and talk to people. You do, because you're having to sell yourself, and that's hard for people, I think. It's all right seeing people and, doing Bowen therapy, that's fine, that one-to-one. But once you've got to go out and actually, some people really struggle. And again, this is where I always say, work with other Bowen therapists, do it together. Better in numbers then, and you'll all benefit.
Yeah. And I guess part of what can happen is that when people are not used to marketing themselves, and I think it's really important to realize that although Bowen is the frame that we're working in, ultimately we are still the product because we are the deliverance of that particular thing. So how we come across, the way that we're presenting ourselves, our ability to be confident in that, once we get people on the couch, it's fine. It's a done deal. We don't have to worry about it because the training, the technique, the skills are going to kind of take over at that point. But our hardest challenge is to get people to that point. And so for that, we have to have a presence that is confident, clear, understands what we're doing. But what else would you say that Bowen practitioners need to be, when they're out there networking and marketing, what else do they need to kind of be able to put forward to make it more likely that they're going to get that conversion?
I genuinely, my recommendations are always talk to people about, you can't obviously name names, but talk to people about the successes that you have had, because people love a story. And as long as you're being absolutely honest, and you can talk in generalist terms, you don't have to say name names, but you can talk about conditions that people have presented to you and how you have helped that person. I think that's really, really powerful, because once you're doing that with conviction, people will see that passion and think, maybe there is something here then. I might just give that a go. It will make them curious enough to give it a go.
Yeah, sure. And do you help to coach people just on that aspect of being able to present themselves as well, so that you can, as it were, role play some of those spaces, some of those possibilities to help people have a little bit more confidence going into those?
If people want that, absolutely. Because, at the end of the day, and like I say, everybody is different in what their issues are. Some of it is just literally, oh, I never thought of that. Let's give that a go. And other people absolutely do just want a bit more hand holding, to get them through sort of practicing that on what their script and story is.
Yeah. And one of the things I find with quite a number of people is that they find it quite difficult just to allow their face, allow their voice to be seen. There's something about, like, if I stick my head above the parapet and people see me, there's going to be a degree of judgment. And from my own self projecting kind of place, I'm never going to do that in a way that sees me as good and valuable and worth going to see. So do you find that you get practitioners that just find it really, they're quite shy essentially, they find it quite difficult to kind of speak up?
Yeah, I mean, for some people, it just really isn't them. I tend to, the one thing that comes out quite a lot is I usually say to people, the old fake it before you make it. So, the more you can live that you are this, you will be, it will come, definitely. Actually, I think it's just remembering that, you're trying to connect with people on a really human level at the end of the day. And it's you as the human that they're coming to see. So just trust that, it's almost the people that will be right for you, your clients will find you. And the ones that aren't, you will never see, which sounds very simplistic. It tends to work that way, I think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I would always say, because again, as I said, I've never created therapy exclusivity in my clinic, because I've always believed that people are hiring people. So they're finding that resonance with somebody. And again, I think this is why it's really important to have, for example, if you're going to use something like Facebook or Instagram, to have a good, clear profile that shows you as a character. Again, for all of you BTPA members out there, remember as full members, you get a free webpage on our site. So again, how is that presenting itself? How is that telling the story of who you are and what excites you, what passion you have within the work that you're doing, and that trusting that the people who relate to those spaces are going to be the ones that feel comfortable to come and see you, and don't worry too much about the rest.
Yeah.
So, and in terms of when you're coaching people, how are you leading them through it? For like, because there's probably loads of practitioners out there who have never been obviously coached before. They might have been coached by people who are so good at coaching that you don't know you're getting coached when you're in there. But take us through what that process is. How do you begin with people? Where are you leading them into?
Yeah. So what I tend to say to people, if anybody's interested in coaching, I do a free 15-minute conversation because I might not be the right person for them. And you can normally establish that within the first 15 minutes what it is that they're looking for and what can I offer them. And actually, then I think once we've kind of thought, yeah, I think we're right for each other. It tends then to be literally sitting down with the and mainly I do face to face if anybody's in the sort of Suffolk area, but mainly online. Is literally having the conversation around what's going on for them, what would they like to work on, and really drilling down what does that look like that they want to get for the time that they're, which is normally about an hour, so the time that they're in the session. So they'll tend to articulate that, and then I will really start questioning, getting them literally. I do a thing of where would you like to start? And then everything comes out. And from that, depending on what they say, is where I will go. So I will always listen to what they're saying. What is really odd when we're coached by a proper coach is that things come out of our subconscious we don't even know we've said. So people tend to say quite frequently words that same word will keep popping up. And so I might say, you keep saying that you're really struggling with this, and you keep using this word struggling. What does struggling mean? And that opens up another avenue of what's going on for them in the subconscious. And so it can go, it's really, it can go anywhere, but it'll go to where of what they need, because it just unlocks the subconscious.
I love the fact that you've kind of highlighted that as well, because I think over and over again we see these themes of language come out with people, and as you said, they're often very unconscious of the words that they're using to frame the worldview that they're carrying on, and struggling, I think, being a great example of that. But are there other themes that you're seeing with the practitioners, things that are commonly coming up, over kind of multiple regions within the country, over multiple age groups and multiple situations? Are there certain things that you're just seeing time and time again within that?
I Let me think. If there's certain things, so some of the biggest ones are about making the leap and not being an imposter. So that tends to be with the newer therapists who are qualifying. So getting over the imposter syndrome, that's definitely a big theme with a lot of new therapists. And then I think with the existing therapists I've had, weirdly, I've had some of the opposite side of how do I down a little bit now because I want to do a little bit of early retirement. So I've actually had the other end of the spectrum. And again, this is where I say therapists need to talk to each other, because we've got therapists that are going to retire and we've got new therapists coming in. And what a beautiful match that is if they talk to each other. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
because it can work for both parties from that perspective. So, yeah, that's definitely those two ends of the spectrum I've definitely seen.
Yeah. And I think for everybody listening here today as well, really take note of that. If you're thinking about retiring,
Yeah,
make sure you're handing your clients over to someone who's just building their business. And I think this is really the value of cross referral. I mean, down in the Shrewsbury Clinic, because I'm so busy down there, I send all my acute work out to the other Bowen practitioners in the area because I know I can't get to see anybody at short
yeah,
notice. So I recommend them out based on what I know those practitioners are better at. And the feedback that I get is that that only increases my value as a contact point
yeah,
because people know that I'm not just going to try and hang on to everything that comes my way, that I'm supporting the industry as a whole, so and I think a lot of people fear turning down work or just saying, I haven't got the space for that, or this is not the right type of case for me, and then making a healthy referral into somebody else. I mean, even when they come and see you in clinic and you realize the physical thing isn't really the thing,
yeah.
and actually what they need to do is go and have life coaching or go and have
Therapy.
counseling,
Yeah.
psychotherapy, some other kind of intervention. Yeah. So, and I'd like to ask a little bit more about the imposter syndrome as well, because again, there may be people who are listening that have an idea of it, or maybe they think that they are in that kind of imposter state within their business. But tell us how you would define it, and how do you support people within that as an idea?
I think so. I tend to see it in therapists that probably haven't done any of. So obviously, some Bowen therapists have got other therapies under their belt, and so they're used to dealing with the general public. So this, is another. So Bowen is another skill for them, and they can just carry it on. For people, and I certainly felt it myself, coming from a non-therapeutic background or say I had no medical training or anything, to coming into Bowen and from a career which was in HR, you obviously don't touch people, to to a career where you do touch people. It's like, oh my God, this is really alien. And this is so different to what I've done day to day up until now, regardless of being passionate about it. And I think it is that belief, getting them to understand that, why are they doing it? What's getting in the way for them? What is it that is making them think that they can't do this? Because it tends to be that I'm not really, they won't believe that I'm any good at this. And it's trying to sort of break down that inner critic that's normally going on in their head for them, getting them to recognize it, and getting them to then work on strategies of overcoming that.
Yeah,
It
sure.
will come.
So, which I know when I was 27, qualified in kinesiology, I felt like as a young man, it was just kind of like, why can I tell people in their 40s and their 50s what they should be doing with their health? Surely they know more than
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
And would you say from your experience that that imposter syndrome is at some level almost like a self-protective mechanism within a community or a society, that people are then not wanting to shout about themselves too much in case it creates any kind of tension within a cultural group?
That's a fascinating one, actually, because I actually had an example of this. I got asked to present to 10 junior doctors at a local surgery near me by one of the practice doctors, and I was thinking. So the imposter syndrome definitely kicked in for me around, I'm going to go into that community that's medical and talk about Bowen. And I thought, well, how do I convince them? And I thought, just need all the things I've been saying there. I just literally need to explain what Bowen is, the successes I've had. What I was really surprised about from the medical side, from these doctors, they were saying 70% of the people that come to see them have got functional issues that they cannot do anything about other than give them painkillers. And I thought, well, that's fantastic, because at Bowen, and they were saying, well, yes, absolutely. So, so that for me was like, wow, there's a whole world of opportunity out here if we start talking to the right people and breaking down those barriers between the medical profession, which I think for a lot of new therapists and therapists is the bit that does that get in the way for us. I have a feeling those barriers are going away. I think they're more open now than they've ever been, because they have to be, to what alternative therapies can do.
I mean, that's an astounding figure as well. 70% of those functional problems, and they can't do anything about it.
No.
And I guess that's then the assumption that because they're doctors or because they're in a particular space that they hold more cards than we believe they hold more cards than they actually do in terms of how they can approach stuff and how they can deal with stuff. And actually just having open conversations is a very different outcome.
It is. And the other thing that struck me, 4 of those junior doctors were from Asian countries.
Mm-hmm.
They were completely open. They were the most open because they are so used to alternative therapies in their countries rather than just medical. And again, I think, hopefully I trust that we will move a bit more that way, or we are moving a bit more that way.
Yeah. I definitely think we're doing a lot better. I'm quite grateful that in the Chester practice here that I work from, we've got consultant plastic surgeons, consultant vein specialists, and a private GPs. And as time goes on, they're all realizing that some of the stuff that they get stuck with, they can kind of hand over and deal with. And I think one of the most interesting cases came when one of those referred over a frozen shoulder issue to me. And on the 3rd session, and she's come back and her shoulder is really free. And she says, "I'm disappointed that you don't seem surprised that it's better." I was just like, kind of what we do. So now I'm not surprised. I'm really happy with the outcome, but I'm also not surprised we've managed to reach that point within 3 sessions. So I do think it's really important. So aside from the imposter syndrome side of things, what do you think are the biggest hang up that most practitioners are having that they're presenting to you?
I think it tends to be it's the taking that leap of faith to go from more part-time to to take on more clients. Actually, there is another counter side to that, actually, where they're doing too much. That is another area. This is going to sound bizarre, but there are therapists that suddenly realise that they're running around at beck and call of all their clients, and the person that's last on the list is them. And so having to put a bit of structure in to how they run their clinics so that they can actually have a rest and have a break and as well. That has been, in fact, that's been a real eye opener for me, I think, because I wasn't expecting that one.
Yeah. And do you think that some of that comes from, like I can remember in the earlier days, it's like if somebody wants to do work with me, I will find a space to do work with them because I don't want to turn work down. I don't want to say no. And so rather than, I think you beautifully highlighted the fact that structure is needed. So I learned a long time ago that it's better to have fixed times and dates where clients are seen and that you're not spreading people out throughout the weeks just because it's convenient for them and you don't want to say no to the work. So when you're kind of encouraging structure, are you looking more at just limiting what's available when and being clearer about boundaries of work and no work?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm an interesting one because as a practitioner, I actually don't put set timings mostly on my website, and I do work with clients, but I have my structure in my head for the next couple of weeks. I know when and only when I'm going to do it. So and that's, I think that's really important because if you don't have that structure, you will literally be running around, I think, just trying to fit people in. And like I say, I've seen a lot of therapists get exhausted from doing that. Actually, what's really, again, and it's another mindset you have to get over, if you say to a client, this is when I've got room in my clinic, they will fit in. If they really want to see you, they will. So, it's so don't worry. It's about being brave and actually saying, no, this is when I have time.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think to actually have that clarity, is more helpful for the client because it frames a clear option for them. And for me, it's almost a little bit like if you really want children to feel safe, you give them clear boundaries about what is and isn't okay, so that then there isn't ambiguity. And so if we have that clarity, it makes it much easier for a client to say yes or no. And that for me has always felt more secure. And I think the clients feel more secure with it rather than, well, I could do any time. What suits you?
Yeah. Absolutely. Another area that just struck me actually, Ben, is about the payment side. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people really struggle with the payment side. Oh, I hate dealing with the money bit. And the one thing I've always recommended now, and I do this all the time now, is so I use Stripe. There are many other systems out there, but I can literally just send a link to people by text before they come to me and they pay up front. So we don't even have to discuss money when they come from the door. And actually, that seems to work. It's amazing. So again, if people really don't want to have the hassle of the money, dealing with the money at the end and taking the payment, it's another option for them if they feel that uncomfortable.
Yeah, and again, I think it's really worth doing. I always send a pre-session email out to people that has the payment details in there. This is what I want. This is how I want it. If you have any questions, let me know. So sometimes I'll get people contact me and saying, can I pay in an alternative way? Do you mind if I bring money to the session? It's like, yep,
Yeah,
no
that's
problem,
fine.
whatever works for
Yeah,
you. But, there's a structure for you. If you need an adaptation for it, just let me know. And like you say, it totally takes the weight off. And I think managing client expectation is such an important part of doing good therapy
yeah,
work as well, both from pre-session to post-session. Again, I think just being able to talk through with somebody like yourself about those factors is kind of
yeah,
essential.
absolutely.
And I'm curious as well that when you're working with people, how do you help them frame their idea of success? What is it that we're looking for as a successful practitioner?
And again, this is not as long as a piece of string, but this is really individual because we all have different perceptions about what success is and what we need. So some people will be, well, I only want to be part time and have, well, what does that look like? How many clients are you sort of thinking that you want to see in a week? So almost getting them to sort of put a bit more meat on the bones for them around what that success looks like, so they can quantify it. For some people, it's much more. I want my clients to say really great things about me and really have great sort of testimonials, and so that's a different motivator for some people. So I have to literally work with what is it for that individual that means success, because we're all so different about what we perceive as successful.
Yeah. And are you finding that some people are creating unreasonable expectations for themselves, and some people have limitations that are not grounded in decent fact?
I I think the hardest one I struggle with is when I think people have committed financially to something, and then they are financially wedded to, I have to make this much money. That almost becomes a real blocker for them, because almost it's weirdly the wrong like I say, I was saying earlier, the wrong motivation. Actually, if you get it right, the clients will come and the money will come. But if you focus on them solely on the money, you you may struggle.
And do you find that that can come with almost like a lack of the care and compassion for the service that we're offering that would make what that person does feel so valuable to the people receiving it, that all it does is perpetuate more of that value, and as you say, the financial side of it then grows?
I genuinely think clients pick up if you are money orientated. I think they have a sixth sense. I'm absolutely convinced, and that's based on some of the therapists I've seen that have been very successful and some that haven't. And
Hmm.
it's about what motivates you in the first place to be a Bowen therapist. And yeah, and again, I'm sure there's some sort of science or karma or something about that, but that's just definitely what I've certainly seen and experienced.
Yeah, sure. And I know one of the things that you're also doing with the Bowen practitioners, aside from offering this guidance and support, is you're including or you're starting to help them with concepts of how they are coaching clients as well. And, so it's not just you're on the couch, we do your work, you're off, water walking, see you in a week, off you go. That there's more depth involved in that process of the client journey. So, what can you tell us about that?
And this is again, this is one where I think some therapists are really comfortable with talking to their clients, and some actually really don't want to get involved and want to purely, you know, practice Bowen, but without getting into, lots of deeper conversations. So again, this is down to the individual. But those that I think are really feeling like, I get a lot of clients that offload to me. I think that actually says that, well, they feel very comfortable with you, and there must be something about your energy that they feel that they're comfortable in your space, but learning that you don't take that on. You cannot take their issues on. So there's something about how you protect yourself for not taking that on, but how by not giving them any answers, because they would be your answers, but by asking them questions about what they're saying. So it can be things like, if they're really struggling with something, well, what's important to you about that? Or what impact is that having on you? Or what needs to be addressed and resolved? There's a whole series of questions that you can ask that can just help that person to sort of think through for themselves, to help themselves.
Yeah, brilliant. I've certainly become a really big advocate in recent years of something called the clean language approach, which is an incredible questioning structure. Anybody who's listening as well, if you're a BTPA member, go and look at the last In Touch journal. You'll find my review of that as a book in
Yeah.
there as well. But so helpful just to have these clean questions that we can offer out without trying. And I think the big point that you're making in there is we're not trying to solve the problem. We're trying to encourage an opening of the thinking around the problem so that the client can observe it from a different perspective for themselves.
Yeah. It's allowing them to help themselves. Yeah. Is the most important thing.
Yeah, sure. And it's almost like when we're looking at range of motion within people and what feels safe, what feels comfortable, and what we believe we can do, and just exploring some of that stuff from a mind point of view, and just looking at how those relationships can affect the way we're physically holding the body as well. And we often see this obviously once the Bowen release has taken place, that there can be that emotional release that follows it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That whole mind body connection, where I think Bowen absolutely creates that channel between the two, is a game changer, I think, for people.
Yeah. And what do you think that, having been through the Bowen learning process yourself, having all that experience with HR, with training, with coaching, what do you think that we should be teaching in Bowen technique that perhaps traditionally hasn't been part of the teaching model, but perhaps we're seeing more moving forward?
Interestingly, I think we've probably just started to touch on it. So this whole mind body connection, I think when I came into Bowen, I had not probably appreciated how much I would have clients that actually come to me because they want help with anxiety.
Hmm.
And actually, because Bowen calms and balances them out, basically, in their words, and resets them, as they say. However, I think there's almost just that maybe there's more we can do about the mind body side and that link, because I do think, I think, as we said, that sometimes we probably do actually genuinely need to refer people on, and I certainly do, because I've been used to it in my career, I guess, noticing when somebody can't let go of something from the past and they just can't let it go, and it's released from them having Bowen, they then need to actually have some counselling or therapy to work on that. So it's probably almost that link with other therapies, other things that actually are complementary to Bowen.
Yeah. And if you were going to offer tips to any of our practitioner listeners about things that they could very easily start to consider in their practices, what would be kind of like top tips from you on that kind of in that kind of direction?
I think for me, it's about if you want to grow your practice and you're only relying on word of mouth, I guess the question is that enough? And doing something as simple as just asking your clients, please, could you just refer me to your friends and your family and tell them
Hmm.
all about it? It's really helpful. Just doing that. Because a lot of people just let client go out the door, but just doing that, even if it makes a big difference, because they're more likely to do it.
Yeah, sure. And I think one of the things that I've found has been quite helpful in that direction as well. If that feels a little bit uncomfortable to somebody to just ask for that referral, make it as an incentive. Here's a two-part card with a code on it. You hand this to somebody, and when they bring it back, they get 25% off their first session, and you get 25% off the session
Yeah,
that you get after that. So
absolutely.
it encourages that kind of self-maintenance work with the clients that you are successful with, while also just encouraging them to speak about what you're doing, to promote what's going on around them.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. And I think that networking is probably one of the most important skills that we have to develop outside of the actual practice itself. The having some way that when somebody says to you, what do you do? That you can have, within 60 seconds, you can create a very simple open space that isn't selling to somebody, but is just being able to say, well, this is what I do. I really help with chronic pain. I really help with these things. And if you know anybody who's got any issues like that, send them my way.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree.
And it's all a good practice to do. It's all a good practice to do. Okay, so Sharon, is there anything else that you think that we should be thinking about as a life coach, as Bowen practitioners, that we haven't spoken about so far?
Oh, I cannot think of anything else. I don't think so. I think we've covered lots of things.
Yeah, definitely. And certainly if people are looking for personal development, and I think again as Bowen practitioners, one of the important things is to get broad training, is not just to think that it's another Bowen course that's going to make that side of the practice better or more effective. To actually speak with somebody like yourself, to find out genuinely where are the blocks and the limitations and the underperforming areas within the practice, and what's the specific training that they can look at doing within that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it is that genuine. It's so easy for us to keep loading things into the our armory, as it were, but actually not step back and actually look at ourselves as the tool, and how is it working for us, and are we getting the best out of everything. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely vital. And it's been great speaking to you, Sharon. We've been kicking this on for an hour now, which is pretty impressive. We've rolled through that very quickly. So, and aside from the fact that obviously people can book in with you to have a 15-minute discovery call to look at whether or not working with you would be a useful thing, but where should we send people if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, so my website is sharonscofieldcoaching.co.uk. And so if you go on there, all my contact details are there. I'm more than happy to just, give me a call, have a chat, and just see if I can help and work for you. So please do that, because, it's not going to cost you anything, is it? It's not going to cost us anything to have a chat. It'll just be, but it may help, I trust.
Brilliant, perfect. We'll make sure there's a link in the description below for people to be able to connect into Sharon, and we'll also stick a link up through the CBS training pages as well. And I look forward to hearing your feedback, Bowen practitioners, about how your own life coaching and development is adding value into your business. I can't speak highly enough for doing this type of thing. I've done it throughout my career. Thankfully, I was always very encouraged to look at those areas. And while I've been here, I just want to give a shout out to Karen Carpenter, who's done a lot of life coaching with me in my business. And I can always remember one day saying to her, I feel like I'm doing everything that I can do. And without even pausing, she just said, yeah, but is that everything that can be done? And it just, that question, just my head just went, because it suddenly started to realize that I was creating almost this ceiling for myself. So never underestimate the power of good life coaching to ask you the questions that are going to take your business into other places. I highly recommend it for you in the Bowen world. So Sharon, thank you so much for taking your time today to talk with us about this. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Really appreciate that.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, no problem at all. And thank you as well to everybody who's been listening in. Your time and attention is also really appreciated. Let's not forget to hit the like buttons, hit the subscribe buttons, share this. Let's help get the value of burn technique further out into the world so that more people are benefiting from the wonderful skills we've had. And don't be afraid to go and talk to those doctors as well. And if you are afraid, get in contact with Sharon. Let's get you sorted so that your businesses continue to grow and thrive. But thank you, everybody, and we'll be bringing you more great interviews again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.